I sat alone on my parents' couch with my headset on and the game paused, and I listened to the house like it was going to accuse me out loud. Upstairs, a stranger walked around in my brother's bedroom. A few feet of ceiling and wood stood between my family's normal life and a secret that could break it. If the garage door opened early, if a neighbor knocked, if my mom called to say they turned back, I would have been caught with no excuse that sounded clean. I kept repeating the rule in my head, slow and hard, like it could seal the walls shut. Mom and Dad could never know. Not later, not ever, not in some angry confession during a holiday fight, not as a joke, not as a mistake. I had offered this like a lifeline, and I had demanded silence like a threat. The moment I agreed to it, I had stepped into a line I could not see anymore. The living room felt staged, like I had placed every object to look harmless. Controller on my lap, a soda on the table, a fantasy game menu frozen on the screen. I turned the volume down so low it barely breathed. Even the console's little fan sounded too loud. My heart beat harder each time the air conditioner clicked on, because the sound changed and my brain kept telling me it was the front door. I stared at the staircase. It rose out of the hallway like a dark throat. I did not move. I did not check my phone. I did not get up to use the bathroom. I had brought my brother into adulthood in the most private, most dangerous way I could think of, inside my parents' house, while they trusted me to keep everything safe. And now all I could do was sit there and pretend to be a normal older brother on a normal night. A soft sound came from upstairs. Footsteps, slow, careful, like someone trying to be polite in a chez-eux house. Then another sound, quieter, like a drawer opening, like fabric moving. My stomach tightened and my face went hot. I wanted to run up there and call the whole thing off, to pull my brother back into the simple world where his biggest problem was losing at a game. But I also knew I had already set this in motion because I had seen his eyes earlier. I had seen that look that said he was not just sad. He felt left behind, like everyone else had been invited into a room he could never enter. I tried to remember the last thing I had told him before they went upstairs. Shower first. Clean clothes, be respectful, ask if he was not sure, stop if he felt uncomfortable. And the last thing, the most important thing, spoken like a command. Our parents could never know. He had nodded so fast it scared me. He had wanted this so much that he would have agreed to anything. The quiet stretched until it felt like punishment. I imagined my mom's keys. I imagined my dad's voice calling my name from the entryway. I imagined my brother's face if this secret became something dirty in their eyes. I imagined him shrinking, apologizing for wanting what every adult wanted. That fear sat in my chest like a hand squeezing, and it made me realize something I did not want to admit. I was not only protecting him, I was protecting myself from their judgment. I had done something they would never forgive, even if my intention had been love. A creak came from the stairs, not a tiny sound from upstairs, but the clear complaint of a step taking weight. I snapped my head up and forced my hands to move, forced my thumbs to tap the controller like I had been playing the whole time. I made my shoulders relax. I told my face to look bored. Another step creaked. Then another. I heard a quiet voice I did not recognize, gentle and low, saying my brother's name like it mattered. They appeared at the bottom of the stairs, and the air came back into my lungs all at once. My brother's hair was still damp at the edges, like he had taken the shower seriously. His cheeks looked flushed. He did not look confused or scared. He looked lighter. He smiled so wide it almost hurt to see it, like someone had finally told him he belonged. Beside him, the woman stood calm and neat, dressed like she had come for a simple dinner, not a secret. She met my eyes for half a second, and in that glance I felt judged and forgiven at the same time. My brother walked into the living room like it was his house for the first time. He sat down too close to me, shoulder touching mine, and he whispered, so quiet it was almost only breath, that he had fun. He said it like he could not believe he was allowed to say it. The woman stayed a few steps back, giving him space, letting him take up the moment. She asked if we had eaten. Her voice stayed professional, but her eyes held something careful, like she understood that this was not just a job to me. It was a gamble. I nodded and stood up too fast. I offered plates I had already set out. I asked if she wanted water. I acted normal so hard it made my jaw ache. My brother kept smiling. That smile was the only proof I had that I had not ruined him. But the smile also made the secret heavier, because it meant something real had happened here, something that could not be erased if my parents ever found out. Two brothers, one house, one secret choice. And while I watched my brother grin like the world had finally opened a door for him, the question that had been chasing me all night sharpened into something cold. How did a normal game night turn into this? I had been my brother's shadow for as long as I could remember, not because my parents asked me to be, but because the world kept giving him reasons to need one. I still remembered holding him when he was a baby and feeling how small his fingers were around mine. I did not understand Down syndrome back then. I only understood that he was mine to protect, and that people looked at him like he was a problem to solve instead of a person to know. As we got older, the protection changed shape. When other kids stared, I stared back harder. When someone laughed at the way he talked, I learned to step in before he even realized he had been insulted. I hated how quick adults were to speak over him, like he could not hear his own life happening. He noticed more than people thought. He remembered who spoke to him with patience and who spoke to him like a child. Every time he got treated like he was less, something in me hardened. He grew into a man who still carried a softness that felt rare. He trusted people fast. He loved simple routines. He laughed with his whole body. When he got excited, he could not hide it, and when he got hurt, he tried to hide it too much. That mix scared me because it meant he could be easy to wound. You could see his heart on his face, and once you saw it, you had a choice. You could be careful with it, or you could crush it without even trying. We were not the kind of brothers who only talked at holidays. We had our own language, built out of repeated jokes and small shared moments that never needed explaining. If I made a certain face, he knew what I meant. If he said a certain word wrong on purpose, it meant he wanted me to laugh, and he would keep doing it until I did. Some people assumed our bond was a duty. They thought I stayed close because I felt responsible. The truth was simpler and heavier than that. I stayed close because I liked him, because he was funny, because when the world got loud and bitter, he stayed honest. My parents loved him. They did. They tried hard. But their love came with rules that sat tight around the house, especially around anything that hinted at adulthood, dating, privacy, sex. Those topics did not live out in the open in our family. They were shut behind careful doors, treated like dangers that could not be controlled. I understood why they acted that way. They worried about safety. They worried about him being taken advantage of. They worried about him being hurt in ways he could not recover from. But the strictness had a cost. It made my brother feel like he was always being watched, always being managed, always being kept in a safe box. I saw it in small ways. He would ask questions and then stop himself halfway like he already knew he should not. He would watch couples on TV and go quiet. He would bring up a girl he thought was pretty and then smile too big like he expected to be corrected. No one ever said you cannot want that, but no one ever said it is normal that you want that either. And the silence felt like an answer. As his older brother, I could not fix that silence. I could not rewrite my parents. What I could do was be the one person in the house who treated him like an adult man with adult feelings. I did not talk down to him. I did not pretend he was not lonely. I did not tell him he should be grateful just to have family. When he talked about wanting a girlfriend, I did not laugh or change the subject. I listened, even when it made me uncomfortable, because I knew what it felt like to want something and be told your wanting was wrong. There was pride in that role, but there was also fear. I knew how thin the line was between helping him and controlling him. People like to talk about protecting someone, but protection could become a cage if you were not careful. I had seen other families treat grown, disabled adults like permanent children. I promised myself I would never do that to him. And at the same time, I knew I still had power in his life. He trusted me more than anyone. That trust could make any suggestion from me feel like a direction. That thought never left me, even on good days. When I looked at him, I did not see a tragedy. I saw a man who deserved to be chosen the way everyone else got chosen. He deserved to feel wanted, not just cared for. He deserved a kind touch that was not part of helping him cross a street or cutting his food. He deserved affection that did not come with pity. When I said those things in my head, they sounded simple. When I pictured my parents hearing them out loud, I knew they would panic. That difference created a quiet tension in the house, even when nothing was happening. It was like living with an invisible alarm system, not for burglars but for topics. The moment romance came too close, everyone stiffened. The moment the word sex tried to enter the room, it got shut down without being spoken. My brother felt that shut door more than anyone. He did not argue about it. He just absorbed it, and he started to believe his life had limits that other people did not have. I had tried to be the bridge. I had taken him places where he could meet people. I had encouraged hobbies where he could feel confident. I had told him that he was funny and kind and worth loving. But compliments were not experiences. Support was not intimacy. And as he got older, the gap between what he wanted and what he had became harder to ignore. That was the part outsiders did not see. They saw our laughs and our routines and assumed everything was fine. They did not see the nights when he went quiet after watching a show with a couple in it. They did not see him scrolling on his phone and stopping on pictures of people his age going on dates. They did not see the way his smile sometimes looked like it was working too hard. This story was not about a perfect plan. It was about a family bond. Then the parents left town, and the house became their world for a few days. My parents asked me to stay at the house for a few days while they traveled, and they did not ask in a casual way. They asked like they already knew the answer. My brother could not be alone overnight, not because he could not make a sandwich or lock a door, but because the quiet could swallow him. If he got anxious, he spiraled fast. If something small went wrong, he panicked. My parents managed that without thinking, the way you manage a leaky faucet you lived with for years. They just did it. But when they left, that responsibility landed on me. I agreed the same day, and as soon as I did, I felt the weight of it settle behind my ribs. Their house had rules even when they were not in it. Some houses still felt like a home when the owners left. This one still felt watched. My mom had a habit of calling to check in. My dad had a habit of noticing tiny changes, like a chair moved 2 inches. They trusted me, but they also trusted the routine more than any person. I packed like I was going to war with boredom. I brought my game console, 2 controllers, and the one fantasy game my brother loved because it made him feel brave. I filled a bag with snacks he liked and snacks he pretended not to like. I bought drinks, the safe kind that would not make him jittery. I told my job I would take time off, and when they asked why, I kept it simple. Family stuff. That was always enough. People did not ask questions when you said family. They assumed it was normal. When I arrived, my brother met me at the door before I could even knock. He had been tracking the time, watching the street, waiting like I was a holiday. His smile hit me hard because it reminded me how much a few days could matter to him. My parents gave me a quick list of instructions in the kitchen. Locks, meds, bedtime. They spoke to me over my brother's head while he stood right there. I watched his eyes drift away while they talked about him like he was not part of the room. I caught his gaze and made a face that meant I heard it too. He smiled back, small and grateful, like that was all he needed. My parents left with hugs and reminders and a last look around the living room, and then the garage door closed. The house went quiet in a way that felt almost wrong, like the air waited to see what we would do without them. As soon as their car disappeared, my brother exhaled like he had been holding his breath. He moved closer to me and said, "So what now?" The question sounded simple, but I heard what he really meant. What did adults do when no one watched them? What was allowed? What was safe to want? I decided to make it easy. I told him we had a mini vacation at home, no schedules except the ones that mattered. We would eat what we wanted. We would play games until we got tired. We would talk as much or as little as he wanted. I saw his shoulders drop and something in him loosened. When he felt safe, his joy came out fast. It always did. We set up the console in the living room like we were kids again. The same couch. the same coffee table, the same hallway leading to the stairs, but now I noticed things I used to ignore. The framed family photos, the neatness that never broke, the way the curtains were always drawn the same amount. It felt like we were borrowing someone else's life and trying not to wrinkle it. My brother grabbed the second controller and bounced his knee, ready before the screen even loaded. He picked his favorite character without looking, like muscle memory. I picked mine and we started. The game world filled the TV with castles and monsters and dramatic music, and for a while that noise covered everything else. He laughed every time I missed a jump. I teased him when he rushed into fights without thinking. He did not mind losing as long as we were losing together. I watched him closely, even when I pretended not to. I always did. If he got frustrated, he could go from happy to angry in 1 minute. If he got embarrassed, he shut down. That was part of the job, the unspoken job I had accepted years ago. I scanned his face for storms. I listened for changes in his voice. I stayed one step ahead so he did not have to. The first day felt good. It felt like a break from the rules, and it also felt like a test. The phone did not ring. No neighbor stopped by. No surprise delivery. Just us, in a clean, quiet house, playing a hard game and eating snacks straight from the bag. The simple freedom made me remember how much of my brother's life was built around other people's comfort. At one point we paused to eat, and he insisted we set the plates on the coffee table like it was a restaurant. He called me sir and asked if I wanted more chips. I played along, and he laughed at his own joke like it was the funniest thing in the world. That laugh filled the room in a way my parents' voices never did. For a moment I thought, maybe this was enough. Maybe all he needed was time with someone who treated him like a full person. But the calm had an edge to it, like a glass set too close to the counter. I could feel the risk in small things. If he spilled a drink, my mom would notice. If we stayed up too late, he would be tired and my dad would ask why. If my brother said the wrong thing on a phone call, the whole house of careful rules would snap back into place. I did not tell my brother any of that. I kept the pressure in my own chest and smiled like everything was easy. As it got later, we went back to the game, deeper into it, chasing a boss we kept losing to. My brother started to talk more, the way he did when he felt close to me. He talked about characters like they were real people. He talked about how one of them was brave because he had someone who believed in him. He said he wished he had magic sometimes, because then people would not look at him the way they did. I told him he did not need magic. I told him he was strong already. He nodded, but the nod looked automatic, like he had heard that line before and it did not reach the place that hurt. The game loaded a new area with a gloomy sky and a loud character who insulted our player, and my brother laughed at the voice acting. I laughed too. It felt harmless. It felt like nothing. A few quiet days. No parents, just two brothers. Then one small joke in a video game hit a real wound. We had been laughing hard enough that my stomach hurt, the kind of laughing that made the controller shake in my hands. On the screen, our character stood in front of some loud, cruel man who acted like he owned the world. The man pointed at the player and started insulting him, calling him weak, calling him alone, making it sound like being unwanted was the worst thing you could be. Then the word came out, maidenless. It was a stupid line in a stupid moment, the kind of thing you repeated because it sounded dramatic. I had done it before with friends. It had always been a joke. I leaned toward my brother and said it in a fake deep voice, copying the character, maidenless. I dragged it out to make it even more ridiculous. I expected him to laugh and throw a pillow at me like he always did. He did not laugh. At first I thought he did not hear me. I said it again, softer, like I was sharing a secret joke between us. Maidenless. Come on, man, you were totally maidenless. He froze with the controller in both hands, thumbs hovering over the buttons like his body forgot what the game was. His smile slid off his face so fast it looked painful. His eyes stayed on the TV, but I could tell he was not seeing it anymore. The game music kept playing, cheerful and loud, and it sounded wrong in the room. I glanced at him and waited for the delayed laugh. It did not come. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something, then closed again. He swallowed, and the sound of it felt too clear in the quiet. I paused the game. The TV went still, and the silence hit even harder. My brother kept staring forward. His shoulders hunched in a way I had not seen all night, like the couch suddenly weighed too much. I said his name just once. He looked at me then, and what I saw in his face made my chest tighten. He looked embarrassed, but not in a small way. He looked exposed, like I had pulled a curtain back without meaning to. He spoke slowly, choosing each word like it could hurt him. He said, "I am maidenless." I waited for him to smile after it, to show me he was joking with me. He did not. His eyes got wet, not with big tears, but with that glassy shine that meant he was trying hard not to cry. I tried to fix it fast, the way I always tried to fix things fast. I told him it was just a line from the game. I told him it did not mean anything. I told him that character was rude and stupid. I reached out and nudged his shoulder like I could push the sadness away. He did not move. He said, "I will never have a girlfriend." The words landed heavy on the carpet between us. They did not sound like a complaint. They sounded like a sentence he had been repeating in his head for years until it became truth. I felt my throat go tight. I had heard him talk about wanting a girlfriend before. I had heard him ask questions. I had heard him say someone was pretty, but this was different. This was not wanting. This was giving up. I asked him why he said that, and my voice came out too careful, too adult, like I was stepping around something sharp. He stared at the paused screen and started listing reasons like he had been preparing them. He said girls did not like him. He said boys his age had girlfriends and he did not. He said people laughed. He said he was different. He said he tried, but it never worked. He said he was tired of trying. Each sentence was simple. None of them were dramatic. That was what scared me. He said it like it was obvious, like the world had already voted and he had accepted the result. I wanted to argue with him. I wanted to tell him he was wrong and that love would happen when it happened. I wanted to feed him the same bright promises people used when they did not know what to say. But I had lived beside him long enough to know what he meant. He did not have the same chances other men had. He did not meet people easily. He did not flirt in the usual way. He did not hide nerves behind smooth words. When he liked someone, it showed. When he got rejected, it stayed with him. And because my parents kept romance locked away in the house, he had nowhere to practice being an adult in that part of life. He had nowhere to fail safely. I looked at him and I saw the little kid he had been, watching other kids pair off at school dances while he stood with his hands in his pockets, smiling too hard. I saw him coming home quiet after a party. I saw him acting like he did not care, even when his whole body showed he cared. He sniffed once and wiped his nose fast, like he was ashamed of even that small loss of control. Then he laughed, a short, nervous sound that did not match his face, and he said, "I am maidenless," and it sounded like he had decided to punish himself with the joke before anyone else could. Something cold moved through me. Not anger at him. Anger at the world. Anger at every person who treated him like a child, then turned around and expected him to accept an adult kind of loneliness. I leaned closer and asked him what he wanted, not what he thought he could get, what he wanted. He hesitated, then whispered, "I wanted a girlfriend. I wanted to kiss a girl. I wanted to be like other men." The way he said men made it clear. He did not want to be a special case. He did not want a pat on the head. He wanted what everyone talked about in movies and songs like it was normal. He wanted to feel chosen. My mind ran through options fast, and every safe option felt like it would take months or years, and he looked like he had already been waiting forever. I felt the pressure of my parents' rules, the pressure of time, the pressure of his trust. I realized I stood at a point where I could either say the kind words that made the moment softer, or I could do something that actually changed it. One word in a game exposed years of loneliness. And now I had to decide what kind of brother I was going to be next. I sat there with the game paused and my brother's words hanging in the air, and I realized I had been treating his loneliness like a bad mood. I had acted like it could be fixed with snacks, jokes, and a few days of brother time. But the look on his face told me it had been living in him for a long time, growing quietly while everyone else pretended it was not there. I asked him when he started feeling like this, and he shrugged like the answer did not matter. That shrug made me angry, because it meant he had stopped believing his feelings deserved space. He kept his eyes on the frozen screen and said he did not know. He said it had always been like that. He said girls were nice to him, but not like that. He said they called him sweet and then they left. I told him that being sweet was not a bad thing. I told him a good person would want someone kind. I heard my own voice and hated how empty it sounded. Kindness was not a magic key. Kindness did not erase the way people judged him before they even learned his name. He started talking more, and once he started, it came out in a rush like a dam cracking. He said his friends from school had girlfriends now. He said he saw pictures online of dates and kisses and people holding hands. He said he felt like a kid watching through a window. He said he felt stupid because he wanted it so badly. Then he whispered that sometimes he felt ugly. That word hit me harder than the rest. Ugly, not lonely, not unlucky, ugly. That meant he had taken every rejection and turned it into a story about his body, his face, his chromosome count, something he could not change. I wanted to grab him and shake that belief out of him, but I did not. I kept my hands on my knees and made my voice calm because I knew he watched me for cues. If I panicked, he would panic. If I acted like it was shameful, he would fold in on himself. I told him he was not ugly. I told him he looked good. I told him he had a great smile. He glanced at me like he wanted to believe it but could not. His eyes drifted away again, back to the TV, back to the safe place where nothing real could reach him. I tried a different approach. I asked him what he thought a girlfriend would feel like. Not what they would do, just what it would mean. He thought for a moment and said it meant someone chose you. He said it meant you were not alone. He said it meant someone wanted to sit next to you even when they did not have to. He said it meant someone touched you and did not pull away. The way he said touched made his voice go softer, like he was afraid of the word. I swallowed and nodded because I knew that part was real too. Adults needed affection. Adults needed closeness. It was not a dirty want. It was a human want. And my brother had been living in a house where that want was treated like a danger. I asked him if he had ever kissed anyone. He shook his head. I asked if anyone had ever held his hand like that. He shook his head again. He tried to smile as if it was fine, but it was a thin smile, one he used when he wanted to change the subject without making anyone mad. I told him it was normal to want those things. I said it plainly, like I was correcting something that had been taught wrong. His eyes flicked to mine, and I saw relief and fear mixed together. Relief that I said it. Fear that wanting it made him bad. He asked me if I had a girlfriend when I was his age. The question was innocent, but it made me feel exposed. I said yes. I said I had dated. I said it had not always been easy, but I had chances. I had been able to meet people, make mistakes, try again. Even when I failed with dignity because people expected me to want love. No one treated my wanting as a problem to manage. My brother listened and nodded like he was collecting facts about a world that did not include him. Then he said, "That was easy for you." I almost argued. I almost said it had not been easy, that I had been rejected too, that everyone struggled. But I stopped myself because I knew what he meant. He did not mean I never felt pain. He meant I got to enter the game at all. I got to play. He kept getting told, quietly, politely, that the game was not for him. I looked around the living room, at the family photos and the tidy shelves and the hallway that led upstairs. The house felt like a museum of our family. Everything had a place. Everything had rules. And in that clean, quiet space, my brother was telling me he felt unwanted in the one way that could not be fixed with routine. I told him we could work on it. I said we could help him meet people. I said we could look for social groups, activities, events. I said maybe there were dating apps that were safer, places where he could talk to someone. As I spoke, I heard the distance in my own plan. Weeks, months, maybe, try, maybe it will happen. All of it sounded like another way of saying, wait. His face did not change. He did not perk up. He did not ask questions. He only nodded polite, like he did not want to hurt my feelings by showing how little hope he had left. That was the moment the panic started in me. Not loud panic, quiet panic, the kind that turned into math. If he kept believing this, what did it do to him a year from now? 5 years from now? What did it do to his confidence, his mood, his sense of being a man? I had seen him get stuck in feelings before. When he got convinced of something, it became the only story he could tell himself. And this story was poison. It would follow him everywhere. Every time he saw a couple in public. Every time a friend mentioned a date. Every time my parents made a joke about grandkids, it would keep proving itself. I leaned forward and asked him something I had never asked him in my life. I asked him if he wanted to have an adult experience. I did not say the word sex. I did not need to. The air changed when I said adult experience. His eyes widened. He looked nervous. He looked curious. He looked like he was standing at the edge of a pool, deciding if the water would hurt. He whispered yes, then added, but Mom and Dad would be mad. There it was, the rule that ran our house even when my parents were gone. The fear of being caught wanting, the fear of punishment for being human. I told him we did not have to do anything he did not want. I told him he was an adult and he had a right to his feelings. I told him that if anything happened, it had to be safe, and it had to be respectful, and it had to be his choice. I watched him closely as I said it because I needed to know I was not pushing him. I needed to know he was not agreeing just because I was his brother. He asked me how. That single word knocked something loose in my head. How, not if, not someday. How now? And my brain did what it always did when I saw him hurting. It switched from comfort to problem solving. It started searching for a door where there was none. It started building a plan before my morals could catch up. I thought about how dating worked for most people. A text, a drink, a kiss, a night together. People stumbled into intimacy all the time like it was nothing. They made mistakes and laughed about them. They learned by doing. My brother did not have that world. He had this living room. He had my parents' rules. He had a deep, quiet belief that no woman would ever want him. I sat back and stared at the dark TV screen, and I felt the line in front of me like a wire stretched tight. If I stepped over it, I could change his life in one night. If I did not, I might watch him shrink a little more every month. This was not about a game anymore. I reached for my phone, and in my head I heard my own voice from earlier, repeating the rule I would soon make him swear to. Mom and Dad could never know. Then I opened my contacts and started scrolling, already choosing the extreme option before I admitted it out loud. I did not announce what I was about to do. I only held my phone in my hand and stared at the screen like it could tell me if I was a good brother or a dangerous one. My brother sat beside me, quiet now, waiting. The waiting felt like pressure on my throat. He had asked me how, and I had no safe answer. In my head I kept hearing two voices. One voice said, "Do not touch this. This was not my job. This was not my right. I was in my parents' house. I was supposed to keep things calm and clean and normal until they came back." The other voice said, "Look at him. He was not asking for something strange. He was asking to be wanted. And he was asking the only person he trusted to help him." I tried to build a normal plan first, even in my thoughts. I imagined setting him up with a dating app. I imagined taking him to a group event. I imagined awkward introductions, slow progress, all of it. Then I imagined him going to bed that night with the same heavy truth in his chest. I imagined him waking up tomorrow and smiling like he was fine, and then carrying that loneliness again like a secret bruise. I did not want months. I wanted relief now. That want scared me because it sounded selfish. It sounded like I wanted to fix his sadness because I could not stand to watch it, but there was more than that. I could see the damage already done. He had not only been lonely, he had started to believe he did not deserve love. I looked at him and asked again if he really wanted an adult experience. I asked it slowly, making space for him to say no. He nodded, then hesitated, then nodded again. He said he wanted to feel like a man. He said he wanted someone to like him. Then he added, very quietly, "I do not want to be a baby forever." That sentence made my skin go cold, because it was true. Everyone acted like protecting him meant keeping him small, and he felt it. I told him I would think about it. I told him not to worry yet. I told him to get comfortable and put on a movie if he wanted. I needed distance from his eyes while I made my decision, because his eyes could push me without meaning to. He went to the kitchen to get water, and the moment he turned his back, I moved. I walked into the hallway and stood where the walls blocked the living room. It was only a few steps away, but it felt like I had crossed into a different part of the house. The air was cooler there. The family photos watched me from the wall. My parents smiled in those pictures like nothing bad could ever happen under their roof. I opened my contacts and scrolled without seeing names. My thumb hovered over a few friends I trusted, then pulled away. I felt ashamed before I had even done anything. What would I even say? "Hey, my brother felt lonely. Can you help me find a woman to make him feel wanted?" It sounded wrong the moment I imagined it. But the thought that kept returning was simple, almost childish. Find him a girl. Not a girlfriend, not a long-term romance, just someone kind, someone safe, someone who would not laugh at him, someone who would not treat him like a joke, someone who could give him one night where he did not feel excluded from the world of adults. I hated how quickly my mind found the shape of the solution. I knew people who paid for companionship. I had heard the talk at parties. I had heard the casual stories. It always sounded like a world that existed next to normal life, hidden but close. I had never touched it. I had never needed to. But now the idea stood in front of me like a door. Then came the fear. Not the moral fear first, but the practical fear. What if it was a scam? What if someone showed up and robbed the house? What if my brother panicked? What if he misunderstood what was happening? What if he got hurt? What if he felt used afterward? What if I messed him up more than he already was? My hands shook slightly as I typed a message to the one friend I knew would not react with shock. He was the kind of guy who always knew someone, always had a number, always acted like nothing was a big deal. I stared at the text box and deleted my words twice before I sent anything. I wrote I needed a private favor, not drugs, not trouble, just a phone number. He replied fast, "What kind of number?" I stood in the hallway and listened to the house. My brother moved in the kitchen. A cabinet opened. A cup clinked. Normal sounds. I felt like I was doing something criminal in the middle of normal life. I typed escort. Then I added it was not for me. Then I deleted that because it sounded worse. I typed again it was for my brother. He had Down syndrome. He was lonely. I needed someone kind and safe. I stared at the message for a full 10 seconds before I sent it. Like once it left my phone, I could not pull it back. After I sent it, my stomach turned. I thought my friend would call me disgusting. I thought he would tell me I had lost my mind. I thought he might even tell someone else because it was too strange to keep quiet. Instead, he replied with one line. "I knew someone. She was professional. She was nice. You sure about this?" My mouth went dry because now it was real. It was no longer an idea I could feel dramatic about. It was a person, a woman with a name and a schedule and a price. I typed I am not sure. Then I erased it and wrote I need to help him. I asked what she charged. I asked if she did safe stuff. I asked if she was patient. I asked if she had ever been with someone with disabilities. My friend did not answer with a lecture. He answered with details like he had done this kind of thing before. He sent a number. He said she was legit. He said she did not do anything she did not want to do. He said if I explained the situation, she would decide. I stared at the number. My thumb hovered over it. I could still back out. I could put my phone away and go back to the couch and tell my brother we would figure something out later. I could choose the safe path, the slow path, the path my parents would approve of. But then I pictured my brother's face when he said ugly. I pictured the way he used the word maidenless like a punishment. I pictured him 10 years from now, still telling himself he would never be chosen. I pressed call before I could talk myself out of it. The phone rang, and each ring felt louder than it should have in that quiet house. I walked farther down the hallway, away from the living room, like distance could hide what I was doing. I kept my voice low, almost a whisper, when someone answered. Her voice was calm, not rushed, not harsh, just calm like this was a normal business call. I said hello, and my throat tightened so hard I almost hung up. I told her my name. I told her I got her number from my friend. I told her I needed to explain something unusual before she said yes to anything. There was a pause, and in that pause I heard my own heartbeat and the distant sound of my brother's movie starting in the living room. Two worlds in the same house. Normal and not normal, divided by a hallway. I said my brother was 24. I said he had Down syndrome. I said he was an adult and he wanted companionship. I said I wanted it to be safe and respectful. I said I would pay her usual rate. I said she could say no with no pressure. I waited, holding my breath, expecting disgust or anger. Her tone did not change. She only asked one question, gentle but sharp. Did he want this for himself? I said yes, and my voice shook when I said it. There was another pause. Then she told me her rate, like a number could make this feel clean. Then she said something that made my knees feel weak. She said she understood. She said she had experience in her own family with Down syndrome. She said if I was serious, she could come that night. And the fact that the person on the other end actually said yes made the hallway feel smaller, like the house had tightened around me, sealing in the secret I had just created. I kept the phone pressed to my ear and tried to sound steady, but my hand still shook. She asked questions that felt simple and heavy at the same time. How old was he? Did he understand what he wanted? Was he able to say no? Was anyone forcing him? Was he safe in the home? She did not sound suspicious. She sounded careful, like she had heard bad stories and refused to become one. I told her the truth in plain words. I told her he was 24. I told her he had asked for an adult experience for himself. I told her I would not be in the room. I told her I wanted him to feel respected, not rushed. I told her I wanted her to stop the moment he looked uncomfortable. I heard myself talking and realized I was begging without saying please. She stayed calm, and that calm did something strange to me. It lowered my panic, but it made the reality sharper. A real person was going to drive to my parents' house because of a decision I made in a hallway. This was not a fantasy. This was not a joke in a video game. This was a door I could not close once I opened it. She told me her rate again and told me the time she could arrive. She said she could stay for a set amount of time. She said what she could and could not promise. She said she would start with conversation and let him lead. She said she would treat him like any adult client but with extra patience. The way she said client made my stomach twist, but the way she said patience made my eyes sting. When I agreed on the time, she asked for the address. I gave it to her, and as soon as I did, I felt like I had written a secret onto the front door. She told me she would text when she was on the way. Then she said one more thing, quiet but firm. She said if at any point I felt unsure, I should cancel. No shame. No argument. I thanked her and hung up. The hallway looked the same as before. The family photo still smiled. The air still smelled like laundry and clean carpet. But I felt like I had changed the house just by making that call, like I had brought something invisible inside that would not leave. I walked back toward the living room and heard my brother's movie playing low. He sat on the couch with a blanket on his lap like a kid on a sick day. When he saw my face, he muted the TV without me asking. His eyes searched mine. I sat on the edge of the coffee table so I could face him. My mouth went dry again. This was the part I feared more than the phone call. A stranger was one kind of risk. My brother's trust was another. I told him I had an idea, and I said it slowly with space between the words. I told him it was not a girlfriend. I told him it was a professional woman who offered companionship. I told him she was an adult and he was an adult. I told him it would only happen if he wanted it. I told him he could say no now or later or at any moment. I told him he would not be in trouble with me. I would not be mad. I would not shame him. His eyes widened and his mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. He looked scared and excited at the same time, like someone had offered him a gift he did not believe he was allowed to touch. He whispered, "Like in this house?" That question made me look around, and for a second I saw the room the way my parents would see it. The couch fluffed a certain way. The coasters aligned. The throw pillows arranged like nobody lived here. My parents' home did not feel like a place where secret adult choices happened. It felt like a place where rules lived in the walls. I told him yes in this house, because it was the only place where he felt safe enough to try. And then I said the sentence that turned my throat tight again. I told him there was one condition. I waited until he was looking at me. I did not rush it. I needed him to understand the weight of this, because once he agreed, it would be his secret too. I said Mom and Dad could never know. Not now, not later, not as a joke, not in anger, never. He swallowed. He asked why. I told him because they would not understand. I told him because they would think I had betrayed them. I told him because they might shame him, even if they did not mean to. I told him because if this became a family fight, the good part of it would rot. It would turn into something dirty and painful, and I could not let that happen to him. He nodded slowly, then said I could keep a secret. I believed he could, but I also knew secrets had a way of leaking out through accidents, through a careless sentence at dinner, through a smile at the wrong moment, through a mother noticing a detail and pulling on it until it unraveled. So I asked him again, did he want this for himself, not for me, not to make me feel better, for him? He took a breath, held it, then nodded once, firm. He said yes. He said he wanted to feel wanted. He said he wanted a kiss. He said he wanted to hold a woman and not have her pull away. I watched his face as he spoke. I looked for confusion. I looked for fear that did not belong. I looked for that automatic agreement he sometimes gave when he wanted to please me. I did not see it. I saw nerves, but I also saw something else. Hope. Real hope, like a light turning on in a room that had been dark for years. That should have made me feel relief. Instead, it made the pressure worse, because now it was not just my decision. Now I had invited his heart into a situation I could not fully control. I stood up and started scanning the house, moving room to room like I was checking for hidden cameras. I checked the front windows. I checked the driveway through the blinds. I listened for neighbors. I checked my parents' office door, the place that always felt off limits. Nothing had changed, but my mind kept creating dangers. What if my mom called and asked to video chat? What if a neighbor saw a strange car and texted my dad? What if the security camera picked up motion and sent an alert? I checked the phone on the kitchen counter and saw no missed calls. I checked the clock. The hands moved too slowly, like they enjoyed watching me sweat. I told my brother we needed to keep the evening normal. No loud music. No weird lights. No acting suspicious. I told him if my parents called, he had to act calm. I watched him nod, and I hated myself for giving him instructions like this. It felt like pulling him into a lie. But the lie was already alive. I asked him how he felt, and he said he felt nervous in his stomach. He smiled while he said it, but his fingers twisted the edge of the blanket. I told him nervous was normal. I told him he was in control. I said it over and over because I needed it to be true. The escort texted me that she was leaving soon, just a short message. On my screen it looked harmless. but it turned the plan into a countdown. I walked to the front door and pressed my ear near it like I could hear the future. The house sat quiet. The neighborhood sat quiet. And in that quiet, my parents' absence felt less like freedom and more like a thin cover we were hiding under. One condition: this could never leave the house. I looked back at my brother on the couch, his eyes bright and terrified, and I realized the hardest part was not paying money or making a call. The hardest part was letting a stranger step across my parents' threshold and trusting that I had not just set something loose in our home that I could never take back. After my brother agreed, the house stopped feeling like a hiding place and started feeling like a stage. Every surface looked too clean. Every sound carried too far. I kept imagining my parents opening the front door early and seeing a stranger's shoes by the mat. I kept imagining my brother saying one honest sentence at the wrong time and blowing everything up. I told him we needed to get ready, and the moment I said it, I heard how strange it sounded. Get ready, like it was a date, like it was normal. He smiled anyway. His smile was nervous and bright, like he had been handed a map out of a place he hated. Then his hands started fidgeting. He stood up, sat down, stood up again. He asked what he should do first. He asked if he should brush his teeth. He asked if he should change his shirt. He asked if she would like him. I said we would take it one step at a time. I said shower first, then shave, then clothes. I tried to make it sound calm, like a checklist could control the fear. Inside, my thoughts kept spinning. I had arranged this. I had put him in this position. If he got hurt, it would be on me. I walked him to the bathroom and turned on the light. The harsh brightness made him squint. He looked at himself in the mirror and his smile faded, just for a second. I saw him study his own face like he was searching for proof of the ugly word he had said earlier. I stepped between him and that thought. I told him he looked good. I told him we were just getting him cleaned up so he felt confident. I said confident on purpose because it was a word adults used. He repeated it quietly like he was testing it. Confident. I laid out a razor and shaving cream, then paused. I asked him if he wanted help or if he wanted privacy. I made myself ask because I needed him to have choices. I needed him to know he could say no to me too. He said he wanted help. He said he did not want to mess it up. So I helped slowly, careful not to treat him like a kid. I did not grab his face. I did not rush him. I talked him through it and let him do most of it himself. Still, the whole time I felt the imbalance between us like a weight. I had money. I had the phone. I had made the call. He was following a path I laid out, and even though he wanted it, that did not erase how much power I held over the situation. That thought made me stop and look him in the eyes. I asked again if he was sure. Not sure in a polite way, sure like it mattered. He nodded. He said he was sure. He said he felt scared, but he wanted it. He said he wanted to feel normal. He went into the shower and I stood in the hallway outside the bathroom door like a guard. Not because I feared him, but because I feared the world barging in. I kept checking my phone, waiting for a call from my mom, waiting for a text from the escort, waiting for something to go wrong. The water ran. The house stayed quiet. My mind did not. When he came out, his hair was wet and brushed back, and for a moment he looked younger, like a kid after a bath. Then he straightened his shoulders as if he remembered what tonight meant to him. He asked what he should wear. I walked him to his room, and the sight of his bed and his posters and his laundry basket hit me with another wave of worry. This was his safe space. Bringing an adult stranger into it felt like crossing a line I could not uncross. But I kept moving, because stopping now would mean admitting I had led him to the edge and left him there. We opened his closet. He had a few shirts he loved and wore too often. He pulled out a loud graphic tee and looked at me for approval. I hesitated, then told him we should pick something simple, not because I wanted to control him, but because I wanted him to feel taken seriously. I wanted her to see him as an adult man, not a joke. He put the shirt back without arguing, and the speed of that obedience made me feel sick. I told him he did not have to do what I said. I told him he could pick what he liked. He looked confused and said, "I liked what you liked." That was the danger right there. Not the escort, not the money. The fact that my brother trusted me so much that he could slide into agreeing with anything I suggested. I took a breath and slowed down. I told him to choose what made him feel good. I told him there was no correct answer. He picked a button-up shirt he only wore at family events. It was a little wrinkled, but it made him stand taller. He ran his fingers over the buttons like they were armor. I helped him smooth the collar. I asked if he wanted cologne, then immediately regretted it because it sounded like I was building a scene. He said yes, so I gave him one small spray and told him that was enough. Then I did something that made the situation feel even more real. I ordered takeout. I told myself it was to make it respectful. I did not want a stranger to walk into our parents' house and feel like she had been hired to disappear upstairs. I wanted it to start like a normal date. Food, conversation, a chance to breathe, a chance for my brother to see her as a person, not a solution. But when I placed the order, my hands shook again, because now there would be a receipt, a delivery, a timeline, evidence of an evening that was not supposed to exist. While we waited, I set rules out loud, partly for him and partly for myself. I told him he could stop at any time. I told him he could say no without being rude. I told him he did not have to do anything that made him uncomfortable. I told him to tell me if he got scared. I told him I would be downstairs the whole time, not listening, not watching, just nearby in case he needed me. He asked if I would be mad if he changed his mind at the last second. I said no. I said I would be proud of him for speaking up. I said the only thing that mattered was that he felt safe. He nodded, then asked the question that made my throat tighten again. He asked if she would think he was weird. I told him she would not. I told him she was coming because she chose to. I told him she understood. I watched his face when I said it, and I saw him trying to fit the idea into his world. A woman choosing to come to him. A woman choosing to spend time with him. Even if money was involved, the choice still mattered to him. The takeout arrived and I paid quickly, checking the street before I opened the door. I carried the bags to the kitchen and set the table like we were hosting a guest, because we were. I put out 2 plates and then hesitated, realizing it should be 3. That small moment made my skin prickle. 3 plates meant I admitted, even to myself, that this was real. I set out 3 plates anyway. The clock moved. The house breathed quietly around us. My brother kept smoothing his shirt and asking what time it was. I told him, and each time I said it, the number sounded like a countdown to a crime. Then my phone buzzed with a text. On my way. I read it twice. My mouth went dry. I told my brother she was coming, and his face went bright with fear and excitement. He stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor, loud enough to make me flinch. I told him to breathe. I told him to sit. I told him to be himself. I told him I was proud of him, and I meant it, even as my chest tightened. A car door shut outside. Footsteps crossed the driveway. And when the knock came, sharp and polite against my parents' front door, every fear I had been holding finally became real. I opened the door with my heart pounding so hard I felt it in my teeth. She stood on the porch like she belonged there, like she was a normal guest arriving for dinner. She wore a nice dress, not flashy, and she held her bag close to her side. Her hair was neat. Her face was calm. The calm scared me more than anything, because it meant this was not a wild plan anymore. It was an appointment. I stepped outside and pulled the door mostly closed behind me without thinking, like I could keep the house from hearing. I said her name quietly, the one she had given me on the phone. She nodded, looked me in the eyes, and asked if he was still comfortable with this. Not me, him. I told her yes, but my voice sounded thin. She did not move past me until I said it again with more certainty. Then she asked if he understood he could stop at any time. I said yes. She told me she would check with him herself. The way she said it was firm, almost protective. It made my chest loosen a little, then tighten again, because it reminded me how much responsibility I had placed on a stranger. I let her in. The smell of takeout filled the entryway, and the house lights felt too bright. My brother stood in the living room near the couch, hands at his sides like he was waiting to be inspected. His button-up shirt was slightly wrinkled, but he looked proud of it. When he saw her, his whole face changed. The nervous smile he had been forcing all evening turned into something real, something open. Then he froze again, like his body did not know what to do with the moment he had wanted for so long. She walked toward him slowly, giving him space. She said hello, introduced herself, and asked if she could sit with him. She asked it like a question that mattered. He nodded fast and said yes, please. I stayed a few steps back, watching like a guard dog, hatting myself for it. I kept telling myself I was there for safety, but I also knew I was there because I could not let go of control. She sat on the couch, not too close, and started with simple talk. She asked him what he liked to do. She asked what movie he had been watching. She laughed when he made a small joke, and the laugh sounded natural, not polite. My brother brightened under it like a plant under light. Then she looked at me, not harsh, just direct. She asked if we had a private space for them to talk. The word private made my stomach drop, even though it was exactly what I had arranged. I told her yes. I told her his room was upstairs. I said I would be downstairs the whole time. I said if he needed me, he could call my name and I would come immediately. She nodded, then turned back to my brother and asked him again, right in front of me, if he wanted to go upstairs with her. That moment lasted forever. My brother glanced at me, and I could see him searching my face for approval. The power imbalance I had feared earlier rose up like a warning siren. If he went upstairs because he thought I wanted him to, I could never forgive myself. So I forced my face to soften, and I shook my head slightly, like I was releasing him. I told him it was his choice. I told him he did not have to do anything he did not want. I told him he could say no, and we would still have dinner and play games and act like the knock never happened. He took a breath, looked back at her, and nodded slowly, this time without looking at me again. He said yes. He said he wanted to. She stood and offered her hand like it was a real date. My brother hesitated, then took it. His hand trembled. She did not react to it at all, like it was the most normal thing in the world. They walked toward the stairs. I followed a few steps behind, not close enough to hover, not far enough to feel useless. Halfway up, she stopped and turned to me. She told me quietly that she would keep things slow. She told me she would check in with him often. She told me to give them space. Then she looked at my brother and asked if he wanted the door closed, again giving him control. He said yes, and she nodded. The door clicked shut upstairs. And suddenly I was alone in my parents' living room with a paused game and 3 plates of untouched takeout, and my thoughts started attacking me from every side. I sat down and picked up the controller, but my hands felt clumsy. I unpaused the game and made my character run in circles because I could not focus on anything but the ceiling. I listened to the house like it was a living thing. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the soft shift of the air vents, every tiny noise sounded like evidence. I kept telling myself I would not listen. I would not invade my brother's privacy. But my body did not care about my morals. My body listened on its own, scanning for danger. I heard faint movement upstairs, then nothing. Then more faint movement. No yelling. No panic. No sudden footsteps running down the stairs. The silence should have been a relief, but it was not. The silence left too much room for my imagination. I stared at the screen and tried to play like normal. I fought a boss I had already beaten earlier, and I died fast because my mind was not in my hands. I respawned and tried again. I died again. The word maidenless flashed in my head like a curse. One word had led to this. One word had pushed me into a secret that could destroy trust in my family if it ever surfaced. Upstairs, something happened. Downstairs, a brother waited with his doubts. I checked the time on my phone, then hated myself for checking. I put the phone face down on the table and tried to breathe through my nose like I was calming an animal. I told myself my brother was an adult. I told myself he had chosen this. I told myself I had done my best to make it safe. Then a new fear arrived, colder than the rest. What if he got attached? What if this night became the only time he ever felt wanted, and afterward it made everything else feel worse? What if I had given him a taste of something and then left him with an even bigger hunger? I almost stood up and went upstairs to stop everything, just to end the pressure. My legs tensed like they were about to move. Then I pictured my brother's face earlier, when he said he did not want to be a baby forever. I sat back down hard, because barging in would make him feel like a baby again. Time stretched. The game music looped. I could not tell if 10 minutes passed or 40. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. My spine went straight. I set the controller down so fast it clicked against the table. I stood in the center of the living room like I did not know where to put myself. They came down together. My brother walked first and his face was different. Not wild, not confused, different in a quiet way. His cheeks were slightly pink. His eyes were bright and focused like he had woken up from a long sleep. He smiled, and the smile did not look forced or borrowed. It looked like it belonged to him. She followed beside him, calm as before. She looked at me and gave a small nod that told indication without details. He was okay. He was safe. My lungs finally released the breath I felt like I had been holding for hours. They sat at the table and ate a little. My brother talked more than I had heard him talk in a long time, not about what happened. He did not need to. He talked about the game, about movies, about how good the food tasted. He laughed easily. He looked at her with a kind of awe that made my stomach twist again, because awe could turn into attachment. She handled it gently. She included him, asked him questions, and kept her tone warm but steady, like she knew exactly how to give kindness without promising a future. When it was time for her to leave, my brother stood up and thanked her. He said it like it mattered. He looked proud of himself for saying it. She smiled at him and told him he had been very sweet and very respectful. Then she glanced at me, and her eyes sharpened for a moment, like she was measuring what kind of man I was. She told me I had done the right thing by focusing on consent and safety. Hearing that from her should have been comforting, but it only made the situation feel heavier. Because if she thought it was serious enough to say that, it meant the danger had been real. At the door, I handed her the cash I had counted out earlier, plus extra. The extra felt like a confession, like I was trying to pay off my guilt. She looked at the money, then looked back at my brother, who was still smiling behind me in the hallway. She took the cash, paused, and then did something I did not expect. She peeled off half of the extra and pushed it back toward my hand. She told me to keep it. She told me he had been kind and that she appreciated how careful I had been. She said she did not want me to feel like I was buying a person. She said she wanted me to feel like I had paid for time, and the rest was simply human decency. My hand closed around the bills without thinking. The paper felt warm, like it had absorbed the heat of the secret. When she walked out into the night, I locked the door behind her and leaned my forehead against it for a second. My knees felt weak. My brother stood in the hallway, still wearing that button-up shirt like it was a trophy. He looked at me and smiled in a way I had not seen in years. He did not say much. He only said it was fun. Then he said it again, quieter, like he was afraid the words would break if he spoke too loud. It was the most fun I ever had. I nodded, but I could not fully smile back because the relief had a shadow. The house was quiet again, but it did not feel clean anymore. It felt like it held a secret in the walls. And I kept thinking the same thing as I stared at the family photos on the hallway wall. This had been the easy part. The real consequences did not start until my parents came home. I did not tell my parents. I did not tell my coworkers. I did not even tell most of my friends. I kept it locked inside me like a hot coin, always burning, always there. My brother kept smiling for days after, and that smile made me feel two things at once. Relief, because he looked lighter. Fear, because I knew how fragile that relief could be if the wrong person touched it. The secret did not feel stable. It felt like something that could roll out from under the couch at any moment. So I did the one thing people did when they could not live with a choice in silence. I put it online. Not with names. Not with our town. Not with anything that could trace back to my family. I wrote it like a confession and a question at the same time. I wrote it because I wanted someone to tell me I had done a good thing. And I wrote it because a part of me already believed I had crossed a line and I needed to hear it from someone else. The responses arrived fast, and they did not land gently. It felt like I had thrown a match into dry grass. People did not just react to my choice. They reacted to what it represented: disability, sex, family control, shame. It was like I had pulled a curtain and exposed a room everyone argued about but nobody wanted to admit existed. Online, people split into two big questions: choice and protection. The first camp spoke like my brother had been erased by everyone around him, and they were furious about it. They framed it as dignity. They said he was an adult man, not a child in an adult body. They pushed hard on that word adult, like repeating it could fix the way the world treated him. They said intimacy was not a luxury. They said it was part of being human. They said the fact he wanted a girlfriend, a kiss, a touch, did not make him pathetic or dangerous. It made him normal. They described loneliness like a medical problem that got ignored because it made other people uncomfortable. They also pointed out something that made me feel exposed. They said I had not acted out of boredom or cruelty. I had reacted to real pain, the kind that sat in a person's chest and grew. They said I had listened when he said he felt unwanted, and I had taken him seriously when most families did not. In their eyes, the fact I stopped to ask him again and again, the fact I tried to keep it respectful, meant something. Some of them compared the escort to random dating in a way I did not expect. They said a professional who set clear terms could be safer than throwing him into apps and strangers and rejection. They said a professional could go slow, check consent, and avoid the cruelty of people who treated disabled adults like a joke. They painted it as harm reduction, not perfect, not pretty, but controlled. And when they said that, it almost let me breathe, because that was how I had justified it to myself. I had wanted safety. I had wanted kindness. I had wanted one night where my brother did not feel like an outsider. That supportive camp turned my decision into something almost noble: disability rights, bodily autonomy, adult dignity. They made it sound like I had corrected an injustice. But the second camp hit harder, because they spoke to the part of me that had been awake all night, staring at the ceiling. They did not start by calling me evil. They started by saying my brother's disability mattered in a way I could not ignore. They said informed consent was not just saying yes. It was understanding consequences, pressure, and what the experience meant. They asked whether he truly understood what he was agreeing to, or whether he was agreeing because I was his older brother and he wanted to please me. That question made my stomach turn, because I had seen that pattern in him before. The quick nod, the way he looked at me for approval, the way he sometimes repeated my opinions like they were his. I had tried to counter it by asking him again and giving him outs, but reading those responses made me realize how easy it was to believe I had done enough when I was the one holding the wheel. They also focused on control. They said I had controlled the money, the timing, the person, and the location. Even if my brother wanted intimacy, I had shaped the entire situation. They said the secrecy itself acted like pressure. They said when you tell someone this can never be spoken about, you create a trap. A person could agree just to keep the peace. A person could stay quiet about discomfort because they feared causing trouble. And that part made me feel cold, because I remembered how serious I had been about the rule. Mom and Dad could never know. I had said it like a command. I had wrapped the night in silence before it even happened. I had done it to protect him, but I could see how it could also box him in. They also warned about emotional fallout, not physical danger, emotional danger. They said a paid encounter could confuse someone who craved connection. They said my brother might link that kindness to love. They said he might chase that feeling again or believe affection only came with money. They said even good intentions could still leave a bruise. That argument felt like someone pressing on a tender spot, because my brother had looked at her with awe. He had smiled for days. He had said it was the most fun he ever had. And the fear under my relief had always been the same fear they described. What if I had opened a door I could not help him walk through again? The critical camp did not let me hide behind my love for him. They said love could still hurt. They said being protective did not guarantee being right. They said I might have been trying to fix my own discomfort with his sadness by rushing into the fastest solution. Some of them called it exploitation, plain and sharp. That word made me angry at first. Exploitation sounded like I had used him, like I had sold him, like I had pushed him into something for my benefit. I wanted to argue. But then I remembered the moment he picked the button-up shirt because I liked it. I remembered how quickly he obeyed, and the anger drained into something else. A tight, ashamed silence. What made it worse was that both camps claimed they were protecting my brother. One side said he deserved choice, even if it made people uncomfortable. The other side said he needed protection, especially from choices arranged by someone with power over him. They were both talking about dignity. They were just aiming it in different directions. I reread the responses late at night alone while my brother slept upstairs. I stared at my phone screen until my eyes hurt. The house was quiet, and the quiet felt different now, like it had a second meaning. I kept thinking about how calm the escort had been, how she had asked him directly, how she had checked consent herself. I kept clinging to that as proof I had not done something cruel. Then I kept thinking about how I had chosen the day, the place, the secrecy. I kept seeing the hallway and my parents, photos watching me as I made the call. In the middle of that storm, one theme started rising in the replies, something neither side could ignore for long. People stopped arguing about whether my brother had a right to intimacy. People stopped arguing about whether I was trying to help or trying to control. They started arguing about where it happened and who owned that space. They started talking about my parents. They started talking about the house. And when that shift happened, my chest tightened again, because that was the one part I could not defend with dignity or safety or good intentions. I had done it under my parents' roof. I had done it while they were gone. And I had made my brother promise to keep it secret from the two people who thought they were protecting him the most. The comments kept coming, and I watched the debate tilt toward a new question that felt sharper than all the others. Not whether my brother had chosen, but whether I had betrayed the family to make it happen. The moment the conversation online shifted from my brother to my parents, I felt exposed in a new way. People stopped asking whether he had a right to intimacy and started asking who I thought I was. They made it simple. They said the house was not mine. They said I had borrowed a space that belonged to my parents, and I had used it for something they would never agree to. That camp did not care how careful I had been on the phone or how many times I checked my brother's comfort. They treated the location like the main crime. They said bringing an escort into my parents' home broke trust in the most basic way. They said it did not matter if nobody got hurt. They said the act itself crossed a boundary that families needed to survive. They talked about house rules like they were law. They said my parents had a right to decide what happened under their roof. They said if I wanted to do something like that, I should have done it somewhere else, somewhere I owned, somewhere the consequences would fall on me. They said I had put my parents at risk without their knowledge, and then I had covered it up like a teenager hiding a party. That word "covered it up" hit me hard because I had done exactly that. I had cleaned the plates. I had taken out the trash. I had wiped the counters. I had made sure nothing looked different. I told myself I was protecting the peace. Online, people called it deception. Some of them argued that parents needed to know because it was not a small event, not a scraped knee, not a late-night snack. A stranger had come into their home. A stranger had been upstairs. A stranger had walked across their carpet and touched their doorknobs and learned the layout of their hallway. They said my parents deserved to know that, even if it made everyone uncomfortable, because it was their house and their responsibility. Then they made it sharper. They said if anything had gone wrong, the first people dealing with it would have been my parents. If the escort had been dangerous, if someone had followed her, if there had been theft, if there had been a complaint, if police had arrived, my parents would have been pulled into it without understanding why. They said I had gambled with their safety and reputation. Reading that, I remembered how I had stared at the front windows, how I had checked the driveway, how I had locked the door behind her and leaned against it. I remembered the way my body had reacted like I knew I was taking a risk. I had felt it, but I had kept walking forward anyway. The betrayal camp also hated the secrecy for a different reason than I did. I had treated secrecy like protection for my brother. They treated secrecy like the removal of accountability. They said secrecy was how people justified bad choices. They said secrecy was how harm stayed hidden. They said even if I believed I had done something kind, I had also made it impossible for anyone else to check my judgment. That part made me stare at my screen for a long time, because it was true in a way I did not want to admit. Nobody had reviewed my plan. Nobody had approved the person. Nobody had confirmed what safeguards existed. It had all been me. A single brother making a decision in a hallway and acting like love was enough to make it safe. The next camp did not attack me as a traitor so much as they attacked me as reckless. They cared less about house rules and more about what could have happened. They listed risks in a way that made my skin crawl because I had imagined many of them already, alone downstairs, while my brother was upstairs. They talked about scams. They talked about robbery. They talked about someone bringing another person with them. They talked about cameras. They talked about blackmail. They talked about neighbors noticing a car and taking pictures. They talked about how quickly a quiet suburban house could become a scene with flashing lights if the wrong chain of events started. They also talked about physical safety for my brother. They said even a kind professional could not erase unpredictability. They said a single misunderstanding could turn into fear. They said a person could freeze and not know how to say stop. They said a person could agree in the moment and feel violated later when they processed it differently. That fear sat on my chest because I had tried to build an emergency plan without fully admitting I needed one. I had told myself I would stay downstairs. I had told myself he could call my name. But what if he did not call? What if he felt embarrassed? What if he thought calling me would ruin it? What if he tried to be brave and stayed silent? The safety camp asked hard questions about what I had done to reduce those risks. Had I met her somewhere public first? Had I verified her identity? Had I discussed boundaries in writing? Had I planned a safe word? Had I made sure my brother had a way to signal discomfort without feeling ashamed? Had I considered professional services designed for disabled adults with trained staff and a controlled setting? When I read those suggestions, I felt defensive at first because they sounded like systems and paperwork, and my brother had needed comfort, not a committee. But the longer I sat with it, the more I understood what they meant. They were not saying my brother did not deserve intimacy. They were saying I had treated a serious situation like an emergency fix. Some of them offered alternatives that sounded less dramatic but more stable. They talked about adult support programs. They talked about sex education designed for disabled adults. They talked about therapists who specialized in relationships and consent. They talked about supervised social groups where he could meet people in a safe way. They talked about building confidence over time instead of handing him a single intense experience that might glow in his memory and make everything else feel dull. Those comments did something painful. They forced me to look at my choice not as a single event, but as a fork in the road. I had chosen the fastest path. I had chosen the path that did not require my parents to face the topic. I had chosen the path that gave my brother a night of feeling wanted without forcing our family to talk about what he wanted long term. That was not just kindness, that was avoidance. Still, the safety camp did not call me a monster. They gave me some credit. They noticed I stayed nearby. They noticed I told the escort the situation openly. They noticed she checked consent directly. They noticed I tried to keep it respectful with dinner and conversation, not rushed and hidden. Then they criticized the same things they praised. They said staying nearby was good, but not enough. They said dinner was nice, but did not create protection. They said the escort's calm professionalism helped, but did not replace a formal plan. They said I had built a bridge out of good intentions and hoped it would hold. Good intentions did not erase risk. That line kept repeating in my head after I put my phone down, because it was the part nobody could argue with. Not the autonomy camp, not the exploitation camp, not the betrayal camp, not the practical safety camp. Good intentions did not erase what I had done. They did not erase where I had done it. They did not erase the power I held over my brother or the power my parents held over the house. The worst part was that I could see how each camp could be right, depending on where you stood. If you cared most about my brother's dignity, you could call it support. If you cared most about consent and power imbalance, you could call it exploitation. If you cared most about family boundaries, you could call it betrayal. If you cared most about physical risk, you could call it reckless. And while strangers fought over the label, I kept seeing the same real image. My brother's face when he came downstairs. The way he smiled like a weight had been lifted. The way he stood taller in that wrinkled shirt. The way he looked at me afterward like I had done something that finally made him feel like an adult. That was the part nobody online could measure. They could argue about principles all day, but they did not have to live in this house afterward. They did not have to sit across from my brother at breakfast and watch him hum to himself while my parents poured coffee and asked how our weekend had been. Every time my mom smiled at him, I wondered what would happen if she knew. Every time my dad asked me if everything went smoothly while they were gone, I felt my throat tighten and my face stay calm. The secret did not just sit in my pocket anymore. It stood between us at the table like an invisible guest. The comments kept coming and the tone kept changing. After trust, after safety, after consent, people started digging into something even deeper, something I had been trying not to name from the start. They started talking about shame. They started arguing about why this had to be hidden in the first place, and whether hiding it was the real harm. And as I read those words, I realized the next fight was not about what happened upstairs at all. It was about what our family believed love was allowed to look like. As soon as people started talking about shame, the whole thread changed temperature. It stopped being only about my brother or my parents or consent. It became about what kind of people we were allowed to be when nobody wanted to talk about sex out loud. A new group of replies came in, and they did not treat the escort like a danger. They treated her like a person. They pushed back on the idea that paying for intimacy was automatically abusive. They said money did not erase consent. They said a professional could be more respectful than a stranger from a bar because a professional had rules, boundaries, and experience reading nervous people. They said the way I described her mattered. She had asked questions. She had checked with my brother directly. She had made sure he could stop. She had not rushed him. She had not mocked him. She had treated him like an adult. That camp kept separating moral disgust from actual harm. They said a lot of the outrage sounded like people hated sex work more than they cared about my brother. They said if the only reason someone thought it was wrong was because it involved an escort, then they were not protecting anyone. They were just judging. Reading that made me remember small details I had not written in my post. The way she waited on the porch until I confirmed he was comfortable. The way she spoke to him first, not me. The way she offered her hand like it was normal. The way she returned half the extra money and told me she did not want me to feel like I was buying a person. Those details did not erase the secrecy. They did not erase the risk, but they did something important. They reminded me that the escort had been the most careful adult in the situation besides me, and sometimes more careful than me. People in that camp also argued that intimacy was not always romantic. They said loneliness could be physical as well as emotional. They said some people did not want a girlfriend right away. They wanted practice being close, being touched, being seen without pity. They said an ethical, consenting encounter could be a step toward confidence, not a replacement for love. I wanted to accept that fully. I wanted it to be simple. I wanted the story to end with my brother smiling and me being quietly proud and the internet agreeing it was humane. But the replies did not stay in that lane. Even the people who defended sex work started asking what came next. That was when the other camp grew louder. Not the betrayal camp and not the exploitation camp exactly, but something in between. People who said I had focused on one night because one night was easier than building a life. They said my brother's loneliness did not start and end with sex. They said if he wanted a girlfriend, what he needed was not a secret fix. He needed a real long-term plan. He needed chances to meet people. He needed social skills support. He needed dating coaching that respected his disability without trapping him inside it. He needed a way to handle rejection without collapsing into shame. He needed a way to talk about desire openly, safely, and without feeling like he was doing something dirty. They also warned me about the aftertaste of a perfect night. They said a strong, positive first experience could still create a bigger ache later because the contrast could be brutal. They said it could become a memory he chased. They said he might ask for it again, and then what would I do? Would I keep paying? Would I keep lying? Would I become the gatekeeper of his intimacy? That word gatekeeper made my stomach tighten because it described something I had already felt and hated. I had held the phone. I had chosen the time. I had chosen the person. I had set the rule about secrecy. I had been the one who decided what his adulthood looked like for one night. Some people put it in a way that made me feel like I had swallowed ice. They said if my brother could not talk about it openly afterward, then the secrecy could isolate him. They said he might carry questions he was afraid to ask. He might replay the night in his head and not know what was normal to feel. He might feel proud and then feel guilty when he remembered the promise to hide it. He might feel like happiness had to be hidden. I read that and thought about my brother sitting at breakfast later, smiling to himself while my parents chatted about normal things. He had looked happy, but he had also looked like he was holding something precious in his mouth, afraid to drop it. I had created that feeling, not the happiness, the fear of speaking. This was where the arguments got complicated. People were no longer simply saying I was right or wrong. They were saying two things could be true at the same time, and that was harder to live with than any insult. Two truths could exist. It helped in the moment, and it might still carry a cost. That line did not feel like a comment. It felt like a diagnosis. Because I had seen the help with my own eyes. My brother had walked differently afterward. He had joked more. He had looked at himself in the mirror with less anger. He had stopped calling himself that word from the game. But I also knew the cost was sitting there, waiting for the future. The cost was the fact that I had no plan for the next time he felt lonely. The cost was the fact that my parents still lived in a world where their adult son's sexuality stayed unspoken, like a problem you could ignore until it disappeared. The cost was the fact that I had solved one night without solving the silence around it. Some replies tried to steer me toward a middle path. They said if I truly cared about my brother's dignity, I had to think beyond one secret night. They said I needed to help him build a life where he could date in a way that was safe and real and not hidden like a crime. They said maybe that included professional services, and maybe it did not. but either way it could not rely on me acting alone in my parents' house. They asked practical questions that kept me up later. What would happen if my brother told a support worker? What would happen if he told a cousin? What would happen if my parents found the wrong text, or saw a charge, or noticed the change in him and pulled at it until the truth came out? What would happen if my brother wanted to see her again and did not understand why I hesitated? The harshest part was realizing that my brother's smile did not end the story. His smile started the next problem. Because now he knew what it felt like to be chosen. Now he knew what it felt like to have a woman sit near him and laugh at his jokes and treat him like he belonged in an adult world. And I did not know how to give him that feeling again, without turning myself into the person who decided when he got to feel loved. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. The thread kept moving, still full of strangers arguing about ethics and dignity and house rules. But the noise started to fade behind one steady question that would not leave me. Had I given my brother a gift that would grow, or a memory that would haunt him when the house went quiet again? I kept thinking about the moment at the door when I had locked it after she left, and my legs had gone weak. I had felt relief then, like I had survived something. Now, reading those comments, I realized I had not survived anything. I had only passed the point where I could pretend it was simple. So was this an act of love, or a shortcut that could create a bigger hurt later? My parents came home the next day like nothing had changed, and that was the worst part. Their car pulled into the driveway, the front door opened, and the house accepted them back without a sound. No sign, no mark, no proof. It felt impossible that a secret that heavy could sit inside the same walls as my mom's cheerful voice and my dad's tired jokes. I stood there and watched them step into the hallway, and my body acted normal while my mind counted risks. Did the house smell different? Did the upstairs look disturbed? Did I miss a strand of hair on the couch? Did I throw away everything that could connect to that night? I hated myself for thinking like a criminal, but I could not stop. I had not stolen anything. I had not hurt anyone. And still, I felt like I had done something that could not survive daylight. My brother came out to greet them, and he looked like someone had quietly repaired a crack in him. He smiled and hugged my mom. He listened to my dad talk about traffic. He asked questions. He did not hover in the background like he sometimes did. He stood in the middle of the room like he belonged there. My mother noticed it. She said he seemed happy. She said she liked seeing him happy. My father nodded and said our little break must have been good for him. I nodded too, and it took all my control to keep my face steady, because they were praising the result of something they would never forgive. They were admiring the light without seeing the wire that powered it. The secret stayed in my throat like a stone. Later, when my parents unpacked and moved around the kitchen, my brother drifted toward me like he wanted to share something private. He waited until my mom turned away and my dad went upstairs with a suitcase. Then he leaned in and spoke softly, as if the walls could listen. He told me it had been the most fun he ever had. He did not say it like a joke. He did not say it like a brag. He said it like a fact he had discovered about himself. His eyes were bright when he said it, and his voice had a steadiness that made my chest tighten. I felt a rush of relief so strong it almost made me dizzy. Not because I wanted to hear details. I did not. I never did. The relief came from hearing that he felt good, that he did not feel tricked, that he did not feel scared, that the night had not turned into a quiet wound I could not see. But the relief had a shadow, because the sentence also meant the memory had become a landmark for him, a point he could look back at and measure everything else against. A night that stood out so sharply that he could name it without hesitation as the best time of his life. That thought scared me more than any angry reaction would have. I looked at him and tried to balance two truths in my face at the same time. I wanted to celebrate him. I wanted him to feel proud and grown. I also wanted to fold the moment up and hide it, because it lived inside a promise we had made. Mom and Dad could never know. I asked him if he felt okay. I asked him if anything had made him uncomfortable. I asked carefully in a way that did not suggest a right answer. He shook his head and said he felt good. He said she was nice. He said she listened to him. Then he smiled again, and the smile stayed. It stayed when my mom asked him about his week. It stayed when my dad teased him about leaving snacks out. It stayed when we sat at the table and ate dinner like a normal family. It stayed when he laughed at something on TV. It stayed even when he was quiet. It was like he carried a warm secret in his pocket and touched it when he needed to remember he was wanted. I should have been satisfied. I had acted because I could not stand watching him collapse under loneliness. I had made a choice that felt urgent and human, and now he looked lighter. He looked like someone had opened a window in a room that had been shut for too long. So why did I keep scanning my parents' faces? Every question my mom asked sounded like a trap, even when it was simple. Every time my dad walked past the stairs, I imagined him stopping and noticing something I had missed. Every time my brother smiled to himself, I worried it would spill out of him in the wrong moment, not because he was careless, but because he trusted our parents, because he loved them, because he did not understand that some truths did not get forgiven, even when they were born from kindness. I realized then that secrecy did not only protect my brother from my parents' judgment, it protected me from it too. My parents would not see my choice as support. They would see it as betrayal. They would see the house as violated. They would see my brother as vulnerable. They would see me as the one who used his trust and brought an adult stranger into their home without permission. I could already hear the words they would use. Unsafe, unacceptable, shameful. They would not ask how my brother felt first. They would ask what I had done. They would ask why I had done it behind their backs. They would ask what else I had hidden. I had no illusion about that. And yet, when I looked at my brother, I did not feel regret. The smile on his face was not small. It was not temporary politeness. It was real, and it was still there days later, like something inside him had finally believed he was not hopeless. That smile made the moral arguments online feel distant and thin. In the real house, the internet was gone. The secret was still there. At night, after my parents went to bed, I lay awake and listened to the quiet. Not the quiet of waiting for footsteps upstairs like that first night. A different quiet. The quiet of a family that thought it knew itself. I thought about how easily my brother had followed me through every step. Shaving, showering, the nice shirt, the dinner, the rules. I thought about how quickly he had agreed to keep it hidden. I thought about how much power I had held without meaning to. Then I thought about his face when he said it had been fun, and I wondered if I had given him something healthy or something dangerous. Because a secret could be a shelter. A secret could also be a cage. I kept telling myself the silence protected him. It protected his happiness from being crushed by a harsh reaction. It protected his dignity from being turned into family gossip. It protected him from shame. But lying in the dark, I felt another truth press against my ribs. The silence also protected me. It protected my place in the family. It protected my parents' trust. It protected me from having to explain why I made a choice I could not fully justify without showing them the parts of my brother's loneliness they had never wanted to see. And that was when the question became sharper than anything the internet had thrown at me. Was the silence protecting him, or was it protecting the older brother? I kept replaying the same scene in my head, not the night she arrived, not the stairs, not the locked door. I kept replaying my brother's smile the next morning, the one he tried to hide from our parents because he had promised me silence. That smile felt like proof that I had helped him. It also felt like evidence I had done something that could burn our family down if it ever came out. I understood then that the real problem was not sex. It was the line between dignity and boundaries, and the fact that I had drawn that line alone. My brother had been an adult man who wanted what other adults wanted. He had wanted touch. He had wanted attention. He had wanted to feel chosen. When he told me he felt like he would never have a girlfriend, I had heard more than sadness. I had heard him giving up. I had watched him shrink in real time, like he had accepted he would always be left out of normal adult life. So I made a choice that felt like protection. I found someone I believed would be kind. I stayed close. I asked questions. I tried to keep control of safety while still giving him control of his body. I told myself I had acted out of love. But love did not erase what I had taken from my parents. I had used their home. I had brought a stranger into their space. I had kept it secret. I had made my brother keep it secret too. I had not only protected him from their judgment, I had protected myself from their anger. When I looked at it like that, the conflict did not have one clean answer. It had competing values that collided in the same hallway. Privacy mattered because my brother deserved a private adult life. Protection mattered because his disability made him more vulnerable to pressure and confusion. Autonomy mattered because treating him like a permanent child would crush him. Trust mattered because families did not survive long once secrets became a habit. I wondered what a responsible version of my choice would have looked like if I had more time and more courage. In one future, I told my parents everything. I pictured myself sitting at their kitchen table, hands flat on the wood, trying to speak clearly. I pictured my mom's face changing first, shock sliding into fear, then anger. I pictured my dad going silent in the way he did when he felt betrayed. I pictured them asking me how I could do that in their house. I pictured them asking if my brother truly understood. I pictured them turning to him and making him feel dirty for something that had made him feel human. That future scared me because the truth might not bring healing. The truth might bring punishment, and my brother would be the one standing in the middle of it. In another future, I never told them. I kept the secret sealed, not just for weeks, but for years. I pictured my brother bringing it up one day when he felt lonely again. I pictured him asking if he could see her again, or someone like her. I pictured myself saying no because I was afraid, and watching his face fall, watching him learn that even his best moment had been controlled by me. That future scared me because silence did not stay quiet. Silence grew. Silence turned into pressure, and pressure eventually burst in the worst way at the worst time. In a third future, I did something harder than confessing or hiding. I built a plan. I helped my brother find support that did not depend on one secret night. I looked for social groups. I looked for dating coaching. I looked for counseling that treated him like an adult with real desires, not a problem to manage. I found ways for him to learn boundaries and consent in a calm setting, so he could speak up for himself without needing me to translate his feelings. That future sounded responsible on paper, but it also meant I had to face the one thing I had avoided from the start. It meant I had to bring the topic into daylight somehow, not necessarily by confessing what I did, but by refusing to let my brother's adulthood stay hidden. And that forced me to ask a question that felt sharper than the original one. Was I protecting my brother from shame, or was I protecting the family from discomfort? Because if the only way my brother could have adult experiences was through secrecy, then the secret itself became part of the harm. It taught him that what he wanted was unacceptable. It taught him that happiness had to be hidden. It taught him to keep quiet even when something mattered most. At the same time, I could not ignore what I saw with my own eyes. He had been happier afterward. He had been lighter. He had been proud. He had looked at himself like he was not broken. So I stayed stuck between two fears. The fear of hurting him by exposing the truth, and the fear of hurting him by keeping it locked away. If you had been me, what would you have done next? Would you have told the parents and accepted the fallout? Would you have kept it secret forever to protect your brother's happiness? Or would you have tried to build a safer, more open path without letting that night become the only way he felt wanted? And if you believed it could be done responsibly, what safeguards would you have required to protect everyone involved? Not just physical safety, but emotional safety. Not just consent in the moment, but understanding afterward. Not just one night of comfort, but a future that did not depend on silence. I asked those questions because I never found a perfect answer in my own head. I only found trade-offs. And the trade-offs felt heavier with every day my parents stayed unaware, and my brother kept smiling like he carried a secret gift. Sometimes the hardest part was not what you did, it was what you would do with it afterward.